Bibliophiles of the internet, today I'm back to bring you another edition of On My Shelf. As I always say, On My Shelf is a game or tag of sorts created by Ian Broom, whose video will be included down below, as will be all my previous installments in this series. For those of you who don't know, this is a video where you take numerical coordinates and use them to locate random books on your shelves, and it's a great chance to maybe find some books you don't talk about as much, but mostly to share the experiences and stories behind the books. You'll catch on pretty quickly, so we're just going to jump right in with the first set of coordinates, which are given to me by a random number generator this time around, and the first one is 321, which led me to Furia by Yamila Said Mendez. This is a YA contemporary Latina story set entirely in Argentina, and it follows Camila, who's a prolific football player, but her very patriarchal family won't let her play the sport, so she has to do it in secret. I've said this before, but this book gives me major Bend It Like Beckham vibes. We have a main character of color with very conservative parents who don't believe that a respectable woman should be playing sports, and then said main character is leading a double life and maybe also falling in love with someone connected to the sports. I loved reading this book so much. It has so much heart and such a great message about finding your strength and finding the bravery to be the person you were always meant to be. It has sports, second chance, childhood friends to lovers romance. It's about fighting the patriarchy. What more could you possibly want? I have such vivid memories of staying up until dawn to finish this book, and I didn't even make that decision consciously. I had like 40 to 50% left. I went to bed, and I woke up in the middle of the night and thought to myself, I have to know how it ends. So I woke up at like 1 or 2 in the morning, and I did not go back to sleep until I hit that back cover, which is something I never ever do. And people who know me know that I do not fuck around when it comes to my sleep, so if I interrupt my own sleep, it means it's for something really, really important. I have never once questioned that choice or that instinct. It was definitely the right one in this case, and that magnetic feeling of not wanting to take myself out of the story has stuck with me ever since. The next coordinates are 10-7, and that brought me to an absolutely remarkable thing by Hank Green. First of all, every time I think about this book, I think of Kathy. It's very much her brand, with a zany bisexual main character getting up to absolutely bonkers space shenanigans, so I'm grateful to her for shouting about this book for so many years because it definitely became a favorite. I actually picked up this copy at a Barnes & Noble in Florida when I went to BookNet Fest in 2019. One of the best experiences I've had in general, but this was a really fun evening especially. I went out with Bear, Jesse, and Kav, and we had dinner at Panera first, and then walked over to the bookstore to do some damage. It was a really wholesome evening in really fantastic company, and I let myself get 2 books as a sort of souvenir for the entire BookNet Fest experience. I really love paperbacks and paperback reissues, and I think that's a hangover from my childhood because growing up, if I wanted to buy a book, I had to buy it with my own money, which I would get from like turning in plastic bottles for change. So because I didn't have that much, I would always buy paperbacks and mass market paperbacks because they were obviously less. I do love beautiful hardcovers, but I have a soft spot for paperbacks because of that, and when I saw this reissue, it just really caught my eye, and because I was also hanging out with Kathy a lot, I was like, this just makes sense. The other book I got, if you're curious, was the paperback edition of Darius the Great Is Not Okay, which I think is really cute because obviously I got them both hoping I would really love them, and then sure enough, they both became favorites. The next coordinates are actually from my book carts, and it was 3-4, which led me to Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me by Mariko Tamaki. So speaking of BookNet Fest, I've mentioned before that there was a whole group of us who were rooming together, and we created a group chat to communicate about logistics stuff that we've hung on to ever since. And I've also mentioned before that this group started Secret Satan, a typo-inspired holiday gift exchange. In 2019, my Satan was my friend Brandy who got me this, and there's actually a really great story behind this copy that she told me afterwards. Apparently, she had a lot of trouble tracking down literally any book on my wish list in all her local bookstores and retail stores. She was having absolutely zero luck. So in a last-ditch effort, she went to a different Books A Million, and she was having the same issue, could not find anything, and I guess this other customer saw her looking around, not finding what she was looking for, and asked her what was going on. To my understanding, this person was not a bookseller, they were not affiliated with the store in any way, it was just a random customer who happened to be browsing at the same time. Brandy tells her about the gift exchange, the wish list, what she's looking for, and then the other person basically wished her luck and they went their separate ways. So Brandy keeps looking around, and sometime later this person comes back and they're holding this book, which is their own copy, and they give it to Brandy saying she can have it because in a very weird coincidence, 2 of her family members had accidentally gifted her identical copies. I want to be clear, this was her book. It was not from the store. It was not in her car. She left the store to go home and get this extra book and then drove it back to Brandy. Brandy offers to pay for it, of course, but she wouldn't accept it. She was just like, I really don't need it, it's yours. Stories like this are why I love making these videos, because you would never guess just by seeing this in a photo or on a shelf or in a video that it has such an interesting story behind it, and that it's really a product of kindness in so many ways. My next coordinates are 6-10, which brought me to Oculta by Maya Montaigne. This, of course, is the sequel to Nocturna, which is another criminally underrated Latinx story that deserves so much more love and recognition, especially considering everything it's doing in the YA fantasy space. It is so good, and for this book, I'm 100% sure that I read this as I was recovering from top surgery because I was listening to it on audiobook, and I remember I was walking in my backyard, which is something I only did during the recovery process. If you don't know, after having top surgery, keeping yourself mobile, if possible, is highly encouraged because it promotes healing and lessens discomfort, helps you get your range of motion back, circulates the blood, all that good stuff. To keep myself on track, I would count laps on my fingers as I went to make sure I was walking enough distance, and I remember that I got so immersed in the ending of this book that I completely lost count. So I just kept going until it was finished, and then I had to lean on the patio table for like 5 minutes afterwards to just process. It may have even lightly rained on me at some point during all that, and I still didn't stop, so all that is to say, this is a very good book. And the last set of coordinates for today was once again for my book cart, and that was 7-2, which brought me to Goddess of the Hunt by Shelby Eileen. This is an independently published collection of queer poetry. I think I found this poet on Twitter, and when they pitched this collection as being inspired by the lyricism of the Song of Achilles meets soft asexuality, it was an instant purchase. For those of you who don't know, Artemis is the goddess of the moon, twin sister of Apollo, the god of the sun, and she is often referred to as the goddess of virginity and wild things. This poetry collection is an interesting reclamation of that title because I think a lot of people consider virginity to be a fate as opposed to a choice, and it's interesting to see how Artemis steps into that role as someone who's actually ace. I think more people definitely need to pick this one up. It's one of the most unique and accessible poetry collections I've ever read because it is largely narrative, and because it's also playing in that space of established mythology, there's also a kind of authority to each piece. It's beautiful, it's memorable, it's a great entry point for Shelby Eileen's poetry, and I highly recommend it. So those are all the random books I'm going to share for today. As always, if you read any of these books or if you plan to read them yourself, I would love to hear what you think in the comments down below. But that's everything I had for today. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, educate yourself, be kind to yourself, take care of yourself, and I will catch you on the flip side of the page.